you have to have a very, very clear engagement strategy in your organization. And folks maybe don't have a clear understanding of what that means. But we learned through the pandemic that the entire workforce has really shifted, right? Or I should say post-pandemic, that the entire workforce has really shifted.
Hi all, good morning. So today I have Lori with us, who's a seasoned HR leader known for driving business results from strategic talent management and change leadership. With extensive experience across global functions, she focuses on fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion to drive innovation. Lori's expertise includes M&A integration and creating high-performing cultures. Let's welcome Lori on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, where she will tell us what's it like being such a seasoned HR leader, what she's learned along the way, but most importantly, her passion for DEI. Hi, Lori. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lori. So let's get into it. Lori, your career has been focused around creating an effective fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations. Can you tell us more about your experience in the DEI space?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. First, I just want to clarify that I head up HR for a global organization, and diversity, equity, and inclusion reports up through me, but I have a specific leader that oversees that. But clearly, my passion includes ensuring that we've got a very diverse and inclusive workforce. I would say inclusion is probably the most important element of that, because diversity, as we know, comes in many shapes and sizes. It isn't just about gender diversity or ethnic racial diversity. It's really about diversity of geography, diversity of experiences, diversity of style, diversity of, frankly, generations. So all of those things, in my mind, create a really meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for specifying your role within the company as well. I think my next question would be centered around how you approach talent management in the context of mergers and acquisitions, and what are some of the challenges that you encounter during this process?
Sure, happy to tell you about that. I have probably a lot of experience in that space from two prior companies, though we do have a lot of activity going on in my current company. I would just say that when we look at target companies in general, this is just a general thought. When you look at target companies, you're typically looking at what of those adjacencies, what are those products and services and technologies that could really enhance your existing portfolio and really grow, diversify the business. I think it's really important to understand the culture of the company that you are potentially acquiring and to ensure that there are some synergies there, because then you'll have sort of less, I would say, angst as you're bringing these folks into your organization where you have a pretty strong established culture. So really getting, and frankly, when you do a great deal of M&A and you are integrating multiple, even if they're small tuck-in deals, you're integrating these folks, they bring a lot that help to enhance and augment the culture as well. But having synergies and really exploring that in the due diligence process, I think is something that's really important.
Okay, no, thank you. And a follow-up question for that would be is, say you do merge with a company that might have a similar culture, but not as similar as you would like it to be. So how do you ensure that it's a very seamless merge where people can ensure that they're not lost in the process where they're like, what is my mission? What is the values? Where do I come from? So I'm just curious regarding that process.
I think most big companies, certainly at Zimmer Biomet, we have a very clear, defined culture. We've got strategic pillars, we've got guiding principles, we've got culture promises, and they're sort of they transcend industry. So I think if you're coming into an organization that has a very strong culture and has some structure around that culture, it will help folks that are coming in clearly identify or get a sense of whether this resonates with them. I don't know that it's never seamless. It's never going to be seamless, and I think you have to accept that. But to make it certainly more, I would say, productive and efficient, having something around your culture that sort of is memorialized would be really helpful as you're bringing folks into the organization.
Thank you for elaborating more on that and specifying that it might not always be seamless, but if you have a strong vision, a strong purpose, people are more likely to be on board. My next question would be is could you elaborate a little more on some of the key initiatives you've implemented to enhance organizational effectiveness and team dynamics within your previous roles?
Yeah, sure. So, listen, I think you have to have a very, very clear engagement strategy in your organization. And folks maybe, don't have a clear understanding of what that means. But we learned through the pandemic that the entire workforce has really shifted, right? Or I should say post pandemic, that the entire workforce has really shifted. And workplace flexibility, in my mind, continues to be a differentiator because I think folks got accustomed to having that kind of control over their lives, whereas before they may have felt somewhat restricted. There's a lot of liberation in having that flexibility. I think it's really important to have an engagement strategy that focuses on team member well being, team member workplace flexibility, which really sort of goes hand in hand with well being. Very clear mechanisms around learning and development. What is my career path? How do I get there? How am I developed? And I think it's really important to ensure that team members feel very connected to the mission and purpose of the organization because that really drives engagement. What gets me out of bed every morning, whether it's to go sit in my home office or to go into an office or to travel that day or whatever the motivation is, what is it that gets me going? And that's really a connection to what the organization does. And that's very, very important.
I love the fact that you touched upon employee well being because a lot of employees these days are realizing that compensation, yes, is very important. But if I don't feel like an asset to the company that I currently work with, what's the point? Because if something bad happens to the company, worst case, they might let me go. So the company culture, the way companies value employees is something that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. My last question, Lori, would be centered around your vast experience. What is one thing that you've learned along your career that has stayed with you throughout and that you work on every single day?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of ways I could take this. I would say this. I would say that after many, many years in corporate environments, um, what I've learned is that it's okay to bring your real self into your work. And that if you stay true to who you are and you genuinely care about people and you demonstrate that compassion and that empathy and that you can connect with people because you are coming from a place of really good intention, that will always serve you really, really well. There was a time, listen, I'm not going to date myself, but I've been through many iterations of career experiences and different types of cultures and organizations. There's a period of time when you feel that competition and you really want to get ahead and you can kind of, that kind of shows up in how you interact with people. I think over the years, what I've learned is that the more you can demonstrate a level of caring and compassion and genuineness and humility, the more you will resonate with people. And I do try to practice that on a daily basis.
No, what a beautiful way to sum up this conversation because these days a lot of people are posting on social media, but sometimes you question how authentic they are being. So I love the fact that you summed it up by just being like, bring your true self to work. There are certain characteristics that should be part of your true self. But if you're going to be yourself, you're more likely to be liked at the workplace, you're more likely to grow, and you're more likely to succeed at your work. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Lori, for sharing your experience in the HR space, what you've learned along the way, but most importantly, your take on DEI and the initiatives that you've done to create a much more inclusive space for your employees.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.